Greetings from San Antonio, Texas. I'm here for a work conference for my 9 to 5 day job. It's called the Innovations in Technology Conference from Legal Services Corporation. This is a conference for people that work for legal aids, such as like what I do, and it's to talk about all the cool new tech things that we're doing to try to help our clients. So, like at my work, we're implementing at Lakeshore Legal Aid, we're implementing AI in a lot of really interesting ways to just help deliver better services for our clients. For once again, for people that are struggling financially, survivors of domestic violence, survivors of human trafficking, and trying to get them access to justice. And that's like the whole point of it all. Anyway, so I'm going to be here for a week. This is my first time in a long time. My first time traveling alone since having a second kid. My Gosh, I think this is just my second time since being a parent traveling alone without my wife and kids, or kid at the time, now 2 kids. So it's very weird. I don't know if there's any other parents in the class. It's a very strange feeling to just like be alone when you have kids and you work from home mostly and you're, whatever. But it's cool. It's whatever. Anyway, sorry this is coming in kind of late. I was just traveling all day. I was thinking about recording this yesterday, but I just got too busy with like taking care of house things before I was leaving and getting ready for this trip and packing and all that. So anyway, here I am now. It's almost 4 o'clock here. I think it's about 5 p.m. back home. So this week's topic is on crime. Oh, before jumping into this week's topic, I started grading some of the not quiz questions so far. Everything is looking great. I'm looking forward to getting through the rest of them. I should have them all done for like today. I brought my laptop, obviously. So I'm going to be working in the evenings and grading things. And yeah, so if you have any questions about anything, just feel free to reach out. Once again, through the inbox here is how I really prefer rather than email, because I just get a notification every time I log in and it comes to my phone. So it's just easier that way. So anyway, so this week is on crime and social control. And for the record, if you all have seen classes in criminal justice, I don't know if Macomb has classes in criminal justice, but like Wayne State, if you transfer to a 4-year college, they will definitely have a criminal justice department that is like affiliated and kind of, if you squint your eyes a little bit, part of the sociology department. And this is sort of where criminal justice kind of begins. Like the study of crime and deviance specifically, you may hear that term tossed around a lot. So there's like kind of like a sub area within sociology that's called deviance, and that's where like a lot of this research and kind of thought happens in that sort of area. And it's like some of these very basic fundamental questions of like, why do people commit crimes? It sounds basic and stupid, but when you really think to yourself like, okay, let's say you're a young person and you have the opportunity to either go and hustle and work in the formal economy, or you go and like break into cars and steal cars, or just using that example of crime. What leads a young person full of passion? I'm sure, most of you I know are traditional college students, but like we were all young people at one point, and you have passion and you have desire and you have the will to like, kind of find your little space in the world. So like what leads people to crime as opposed to like the formal economy? And I think in this chapter they pose a lot of really interesting questions about the nature of crime and the role of crime. And I think like this is another area that we can all kind of agree that we want to live in safe communities and that the police play a role in that, and mediators play a role in that, and the court system plays a role in that. But I think where a lot of our opinions based on political ideology or just like your general worldview, if you don't even want to characterize it as political, I think that's where the kind of implementations diverge from each other. Because for me personally, I think like what's going on right now in Minneapolis, I think what has been really striking about this with the ICE raids and the immigration stuff and all these kind of things, what's been really striking in all of this is the role that the police have played and how the police have been the local police force in Minneapolis coming off of the George Floyd protests in 2020 and all the reforms that happened. I was listening to the radio the other day to WDET, the local NPR station in Detroit, and they were airing an interview with the police chief from Minneapolis, and he was talking about like this is setting us back 20 years in our relationship with the community. And I feel like in this day that we live in, 2026, there's an understanding amongst particularly urban police forces where the police force is predominantly white and they're policing a predominantly black or minority or whatever community, that there needs to be a lot of work to develop relationships. So you can't have a police force that feels colonizing, that it's there to like just keep everybody in check. Like the police officers need to be part of the community. They need to live there. They need to participate. They need to value the community members just as much as they want to uphold the laws of the community. Because I feel like it creates this imbalance when you have well, first, I feel like it creates an imbalance when you have the police officers that only show up to arrest people and they don't participate in anything else in the community. Number one, and number two, I do think that it creates an environment where the individual officers are not fully invested in the community if they're not part of it, or at least like in the region, or like part of the success of that community. It just is basically like doing a job, like they're not really sort of invested in the well-being of that community. So I think, again, what's been really striking in all of this is that I feel like it's shown, at least post George Floyd, the Minneapolis Police Department in a much better light than these federal officers that are working in kind of like the pre-George Floyd mentality of like, we just are here to follow orders. We need to, just not really regard our actions because we need to impose force and we need to impose our will. And I'm by all means, I think that like we have a lot of difficult problems in society, and I think crime and keeping order is a big part of it. Like, again, I have kids. When I'm out with my kids, or if my wife goes out alone, or even just me alone, like, but I understand like existing in this world as a man is kind of a lot easier in a lot of ways. Like you don't have to deal with a lot of the same nonsense as women do. When I'm out with my family, or if my wife is alone with our kids, or if we're out with the kids or whatever, I don't want a chaotic scene. First, it's not easy to keep kids on track and to keep them focused on the task you're trying to accomplish. And you're primarily worried about their safety. Like you don't want anything potentially harming them, or like, whatever. So we need to have like some level of order and safety in society. I think we can probably all agree on that. But I think, and I hope this is kind of what you take away in the chapter here, is that there are a lot of different ways that we can kind of achieve these goals of lowering crime, creating an environment for businesses to be able to do their thing, where families can have safe places to go and congregate and kind of do their stuff, whatever. While also thinking about what is it that's making crime more attractive than the formal economy, because that's really like the fundamental question. And when I was an undergrad a long time ago, it actually wasn't that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago, the reason I chose sociology as my major was because I was actually an engineering student before, a long, long time ago. And I took the class at Wayne State called Deviants and Outsiders, just based on the title and the description of the class. And I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting and cool. I think of I myself may be a deviant from time to time. And I took that class and was like, wow, this is like super interesting. And I remember learning about Robert Merton and the theories of anomie, which are kind of dated at this point. Merton was writing in, I want to say like the 1930s or something like that. He's very old. He was a great writer. Like if you stick around in sociology, you'll end up reading his original pieces. He wrote some other books and articles on how to write for the social sciences, very meta, just like reflecting on like how to effectively communicate complex ideas in the social sciences. But when Merton was writing about anomie and this idea of the describe, basically what he was talking about is the gap between what you're told that you can achieve versus what is actually achievable for you, the individual. So like, let's say you grow up in a very poor community like I did, and there's this concept of the American dream. You can do whatever you want. I knew from a very young age that there were a different version of what was available for future for me versus kids that grew up in wealthy communities in like Farmington Hills or Livonia or like West Bloomfield. They had a lot more opportunity, and it led to a very different modality of life than what I had available to me growing up in a poor immigrant family. And that's kind of what Merton was talking about, this idea of anomie, that like the kind of dissonance between sort of what you're told versus the reality of what is achievable for you. And I feel like we all kind of have to make peace with that at some point in our life, probably when you're a young adult and you're coming to understand like what are the opportunities that are available to you. But he kind of goes on to characterize like different types of anomie, like institutionalized, and it's like very structural functionalist, to give it a term from sociology. It's very like, here's some categories here. This is this type. This is that type. And it's very like organized in the way that he thought and wrote about it. So I hope you find this interesting. I hope it gives you a little bit of context to understand how this research actually works, and like how do they compile crime statistics. And I don't know if you recall, a few months ago, I want to say, the Trump administration fired I forget the exact title, but it was somebody that was in the federal government that was in charge of the crime stats, like the federal crime stats. I hope it impresses upon you why that is such a big deal. This chapter talks quite a bit about crime stats and like how do they gather them and like some of the methodologies and stuff like that. And there's this open question of like, it's kind of like a Rorschach chart. You can kind of make it look the way that you want it to, based on how you sort of finesse the numbers and organize the data. And so there's a lot of questions about like, what is the direction of crime stats at the federal level, at least. And I think it's difficult. I think that when politics gets involved in something that should be neutral, that should be data oriented, that's where I think it gets a little bit murky, because now we're following like an ideology instead of allowing the data to kind of communicate what direction we should be taking the research, and like what kind of signifiers we should be looking at and things like that. And I guess this is sort of the difference between like the political process versus the peer review process. Like the peer review process, none of that would fly at all. So anyway, I'm going to cut this here. I know I've been kind of going on for a little bit. Hope you find this material interesting. And if you have any questions, please reach out and just let me know. Hope you all have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. See you later.